Rain poured heavily on the quiet street as a young woman stood at the corner, shivering beside a broken suitcase. She had nowhere to go, her face pale with exhaustion, her spirit nearly broken. Just as she tried to gather her things, a man approached, his coat damp, his shoes worn, but his grip firm on the tiny hand of his daughter. He was a single father, living a modest life, yet there was kindness in his eyes that warmed more than the rain could chill. When he gently asked if she needed help, the woman shook her head quickly, her pride forcing the word no from her lips. She didn't want to appear weak, didn't want to admit how lost she truly was. But her hands trembled as she tried to lift the suitcase again, and the gesture betrayed her. The man noticed. Without waiting for her permission, he bent down, fixed the suitcase handle as best as he could, and shielded her with his jacket. His daughter, no more than 7, reached out her small umbrella and placed it in the woman's hands with a soft smile. "Daddy says we should share what we can," the child whispered. For the first time that day, the woman's heart softened. She had expected pity or rejection, but what she found instead was compassion from a stranger who had little himself. In that moment, she realized she wasn't invisible. Someone still cared enough to stop and see her. The man's old car rattled as he offered her a seat inside, the warmth of the heater wrapping around her like a fragile embrace. She hesitated, ashamed to accept help, but the little girl's innocent smile pushed her fears aside. They drove through the rain, past glowing streetlights, until they reached a small, modest home. The walls were plain, the furniture worn, but the air carried a sense of love and safety she hadn't felt in years. He set a simple meal on the table, soup and bread, and invited her to join. At first, she declined, saying she didn't want to be a burden. But hunger and loneliness finally broke through, and she sat down, her eyes welling with gratitude she struggled to hide. Over the soft clinking of spoons, she found herself speaking truths she hadn't spoken aloud. She confessed she had lost her job, had no family to turn to, and no roof over her head. For a long moment, silence filled the room. She expected judgment, maybe even pity. Instead, the father nodded slowly, his expression calm, almost gentle. "We don't have much," he said, glancing at his daughter, "but there's a small room here. It isn't perfect, but it's yours until you can stand again." Her throat tightened as tears threatened to fall. Strangers weren't supposed to care this much. Yet here he was, giving away the little stability he had, not because he had plenty, but because he couldn't ignore someone in need. Days turned into weeks, and what began as a place of refuge slowly grew into something more. The woman, once fragile and uncertain, began to find her footing again. She took small jobs, helped with the cooking, and in the evening sat with the little girl, guiding her through homework and filling the house with laughter it hadn't known in years. The walls, once quiet, now echoed with warmth. One evening, as she cleared the dishes, she overheard the father in the next room. His voice was low, a whisper meant only for himself. He wasn't thanking God for what he had given her, but for what she had given them. "She brought light back into this home," he murmured, "and hope I thought was gone." The woman froze, her heart swelling with an emotion she hadn't expected. She had always believed she was the one receiving, the one in need. Yet here was this man, who had given her shelter when she was at her lowest, claiming that she had saved him. That night, as she lay awake in the small guest room he had offered, tears slipped silently down her cheeks. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a burden. She felt wanted, needed, and part of something greater than herself. It was in that moment she realized kindness doesn't just rescue, it transforms everyone it touches. Months passed, and the bond between them grew deeper, stitched together by small acts of love and quiet understanding. The woman, now stronger and steadier, found steady work and began to contribute to the household. Yet she still chose to return each evening to the little home where laughter had replaced silence, where a child's drawings covered the fridge, and where kindness had once opened the door to her broken soul. She became like family, tucking the little girl into bed with bedtime stories, helping pack lunches in the mornings, and reminding the father to take care of himself too. The three of them, once strangers bound by chance, began to feel like something whole, as if life had meant for their paths to cross. But the most profound shift came quietly. One evening, as the father fixed a leaky faucet, she realized it wasn't just safety she had found here, it was belonging. Her heart, once heavy with loneliness, was now full, not because she had been saved, but because together they had built something worth holding on to. The man never asked for repayment, never sought recognition. His kindness had been given freely, without condition. And yet, through his simple act of compassion on that rainy night, he had gained more than he ever imagined. He hadn't just offered her a room, he had unknowingly opened the door to a new beginning for them all. The little house buzzed with excitement on the daughter's birthday. Streamers hung across the living room, and the smell of a freshly baked cake filled the air. The young woman, now steady on her feet, carried the cake to the table, candles glowing. As the little girl clapped with joy, the father's eyes softened with quiet pride. When the candles were blown out and laughter filled the room, the woman reached into her bag. With trembling hands, she placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a job offer, one that promised stability, security, and a brighter future. But more than the paper inside, it was her words that made the moment unforgettable. "You gave me a hand when I was falling," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "Now, I want to give you my whole heart. You and your daughter, you're my family." The room fell still. The father, usually so composed, felt tears sting his eyes. For all the years of quiet struggle, of carrying burdens alone, this was the moment he realized he was no longer alone. His kindness, once offered freely to a stranger, had returned to him in the form of love and a future he never dared to dream of. The little girl wrapped her arms around them both, giggling, "Now we're really a family." And in that simple embrace, it became clear. Sometimes giving the little you have comes back as everything you ever needed.